Hey guys! Welcome to the Unabridged Audiobook of Snipers, Book 2 of Zommunist Invasion. I'm the author, Camille Picott. If you enjoy the content of this channel, please support it by hitting the subscribe button and sharing the stories with your friends. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy this next installment.
Chapter 8 Resistance. Cassie heard her sister before she saw her. "Cassie!" Jennifer's shout cut through the darkness of the Giacchino property. "Cassie!" She burst through the undergrowth in a shower of leaves. Even in the dark, her head of curly hair and petite figure were unmistakable. "Jen!" Cassie dropped awkwardly from the horse. She tripped on a root before breaking into a run. Cassie's cheeks were wet with tears by the time she reached her big sister. She grabbed Jennifer in a tight hug. Jennifer returned the embrace, crying into Cassie's shoulder. Cassie stood a full head taller than her. Even in the middle of the full-scale Russian invasion with zombies, Jennifer managed to look amazing. Her hair was perfect. Her clothes showed off her flawless figure. Cassie heard their mother's voice playing in her head. "Boys aren't into the tomboy look, Cassie. You really should try to fix your hair, sweetie. Grow it out a little more. Maybe wear a little makeup." She blocked out her mother's voice. Now wasn't the time to worry about how she looked. "I'm so sorry," Jennifer said through her tears. "I'm so sorry I didn't make it to Amanda's house to pick you up. I tried, I swear I tried, but there were Russians everywhere." "That's okay. You sent your knight in shining armor to get me." During the ride back to the Giacchino cabin, Cassie had come to the conclusion that Leo and Jennifer would be back together soon. It only made sense. Leo and Jennifer had always made sense. Jennifer shook her head and cast a brief scowl in Leo's direction. "I wanted to be the one to rescue you." Leo rolled his eyes as he dismounted his horse. "Are you really gonna pick a fight over this? She's here, isn't she?" Jennifer huffed and returned Leo's eye roll. "Yes." "Yes, you're going to pick a fight with me, or yes, you're grateful I got Cassie for you?" "Both." Leo barked a laugh. He looked genuinely amused. Jennifer flashed a grin at him. "Thanks, Leo." "You're welcome." Cassie's eyes flicked back and forth. This exchange between them was different from anything she'd ever seen. It was friendly. That was the only word she could come up with. Jennifer held Cassie at arm's length, looking at her from head to toe. "Well, you're covered in blood and dirty as hell, but you're in one piece. What happened to your arm?" "She had that before we got there," Leo said. Cassie rubbed at the long cut on her forearm. "I don't know where I got this. We had to escape through the attic of Amanda's house." Dal rode out of the trees. Behind them, pushing their bikes and looking miserable, were Amanda and Stevenson. The other residents of the Giacchino cabin boiled outside. Cassie saw Lena and Anton, Leo's younger twin siblings. Lena ran straight into Dal's arms, kissing him like she hadn't seen him in 10 years. Now that was a surprise. Cassie hadn't known they were together. Also among the cabin residents were a few guys she recognized. The brothers from the Craig cattle farm, whom she knew only by sight. There was Bruce, another varsity football jock like Anton, and a tiny old woman. Cassie deduced this was Nona Giacchino. There was a hardness to the group. It was the same thing she'd noticed in Leo. She saw it most in Anton and Bruce. A few days ago, those two guys had been the epitome of cocky football jocks. Now they gazed out at the world with set jaws and hard eyes. It looked like they'd been to hell and had lived to tell the tale. "There's something we need to discuss." Leo's voice cut across the clearing. "We saw something on the way back from the Nielsen's." It was impossible to miss his immediate effect. Everyone straightened expectantly, their eyes on Leo. If Cassie had any question as to who was in charge, it had just been answered. Leo was the king of this chessboard. "We can talk inside," Nona said. "I made minestrone for dinner. It's still warm." Jennifer linked her arm through Cassie's and led her up the stairs to the Cecchino cabin. "Do you know anything about Mom and Dad?" Cassie asked. Jennifer shook her head. "I don't know, Cass. I'm sorry. I got cut off from Mastopol in the initial invasion. Bruce, too. The town was overrun. Neither of us knows if our parents are okay." It was the same for Stevenson. He'd spent over 2 hours trying to call his parents at the start of the invasion. All he'd gotten was a busy signal. Cassie swallowed and nodded. What else had she expected? They were in the middle of a war, after all. They reached the top of the stairs. Cassie had heard of the Cecchino cabin, but this was the first time she'd seen it. The inside was cozy with oversized leather sofas and knotty pine walls. To one side was a wood-burning stove. On the opposite side was a narrow kitchen with windows looking out over the trees. Jennifer led Cassie over to the wood-burning stove, which was currently dormant. They sat together on the hearth while everyone else grabbed various seats. Only Leo remained standing, pacing while he addressed them. "There are 2 new developments," he said. "First of all, there may be a new strain of zombie out there." Leo described the zombie they'd encountered. "A mutant zombie?" Anton scowled. "This is just what we need. Are you sure?" "Can't say for sure," Leo replied, "but he was different from every other zombie we've seen." "They aren't supposed to start dying off for another few days," Lena said. "I heard the Russians say 7 to 10 days. "You can't assume the Nezhit virus will affect everyone in the same way," Stevenson said, speaking up for the first time. "There are always outliers." Amanda squirmed beside him and raised her hand. "Go ahead," Leo said to her. "What if there's a secondary mutation taking place in some of our people?" "Secondary mutation?" Leo nodded thoughtfully at her. "Break that down for us." "You guys said the Nezhit virus eventually kills its victims. I think that's what's happened to the dead pack we saw with the mutant. But the zombie mutant, what if, instead of killing him, the Nezhit virus mutated and created the mutant we saw?" "Maybe it didn't mutate," Stevenson said. "Maybe there was something different about the mutant before he was infected. Maybe there was something in his DNA structure that reacted differently to the virus." "You see that with everyday diseases," Amanda agreed. "Just take cancer. It doesn't behave the same way in everybody. It attacks different organs. Sometimes it can be treated, sometimes it can't." The room went uncomfortably quiet. Cassie couldn't help but look at Leo and his siblings. They'd lost their mother to cancer. "It's a good theory," Leo said. "Maybe what we saw was an anomaly, maybe not." "What's the second development?" Nona asked. "The Russians are rounding up people and taking them to central locations to be infected." Cassie, startled, looked to Jennifer for confirmation. "It's why I couldn't come and get you," Jennifer said. "We attacked a group we stumbled across on our way to the Nielsen's. Anton and I stayed behind to round up weapons and get them back to the cabin." "You attacked Russians?" Cassie was certain there was something wrong with her ears. "There's a lot more," Jennifer replied. "I'll fill you in later." Cassie reasoned they must be running low on the zombie virus. Otherwise, they would just arm every soldier and send them out to terrorize and infect people. They wouldn't bother rounding up people and bringing them to a central location. "Did you take an inventory of the weapons you brought back?" Leo asked. "Right here." Nona held up a slip of binder paper. 24 machine guns and 1 crate of ammo clips." "Good haul," Leo said. "We're going to need every weapon." "What for?" Cassie asked. "We can't assume that was the only Soviet patrol sent out to infect citizens," Leo said. "We need to warn people, and we need to be there to protect them." His gaze shifted to Dal. "We need to get the radio antenna set up. The people need to know about this." Stevenson raised a tentative hand. Leo raised a brow at him. "Yes?" "That's a bad idea," Stevenson said. "The Russians can track a broadcast." "We'll keep it short," Dal said. "Under 60 seconds. That won't give them enough time to track us." "Yeah, if you only make one broadcast," Stevenson replied. "That tactic will only work for so long." He chewed his bottom lip. "What if we hooked the antenna up to a car? You know, like a mobile news station? That way, you never broadcast from the same place twice." A gap of silence followed this idea. Everyone looked at Stevenson as though just seeing him for the first time. Anton let out a long whistle. "That's a damn good idea. Can you set that up on our old pickup?" Stevenson flushed at the compliment. "Yeah, I can. Electronics are kind of my thing." "The chess club is taking the snipers to the next level." Jennifer beamed proudly at Cassie, even though she hadn't done a thing. "Snipers?" Amanda asked. "Who are the snipers? I'm not a sniper." "You are now," Jennifer said. "We call ourselves the Snipers. We're resistance fighters. We're fighting the Russians." "What?" Cassie looked at Leo in confusion. She'd been on horseback with him for over 2 hours. He'd never said anything about them being resistance fighters. "What do you mean? We're fighting Russians?" "She means we aren't standing by with our thumbs up our asses while the fucking Soviets try to take over our country," Jim Craig said. He didn't even flinch when Nona slapped him on the back of the head. Cassie let this sink in. Resistance fighters. The idea made her want to grab her chessboard. "It's settled," Leo said. "Stevenson, tomorrow you and Dal will get the antenna set up on my dad's truck. Cassie and Amanda, you help them. The people need to know about the Roundup and possible Nejet mutation. The rest of us are going to the Craigs." This statement made Tate and Jim straighten expectantly. "You think my parents can help us?" Tate asked. "We know for certain the invaders are rounding up citizens with the intent of infecting them," Leo replied. "We need to figure out when and where the next attack is planned. Your parents might have information that could be useful. They might know something about the mutant zombies, too." "Tomorrow, Leo takes a team to the Craig's house," Nona said. "Let's figure out what those Russian bastards are up to." The room dissolved into movement. Anton and the other football players went downstairs to get Russian machine guns. Nona went into the kitchen to ladle up minestrone for everyone. Dal, Leo, and Lena grabbed Stevenson and took him to look at the antenna they had apparently acquired from Guy's Electronic Superstore in Bastopol. Cassie felt like she was being swept up in a tornado. She jumped when Jennifer put an arm around her. "Don't worry," she said. I won't let anything happen to you, Cass. You'll be safe here at the cabin." Cassie didn't reply. Jennifer had long ago taken it upon herself to look after Cassie, especially when their mom wrote her about her tomboy looks. "Those sneakers look like boy shoes, Cassie. How are you ever going to get a boyfriend dressing like that? You shouldn't wear stripes, Cassie. You don't need to look any taller. You should get some highlights in your hair, Cassie. You look prettier that way." Jennifer was always there to catch her in those awful moments. "Mom doesn't know anything about fashion. Vans are totally in. Supermodels are all tall, you know. Hair dye just gives you split ends. Trust me, it's overrated." This situation really wasn't any different, but Jennifer couldn't protect Cassie from their materialistic mother any more than she could protect her from a Russian bullet. Cassie loved her for trying, though. Nope. If Cassie was part of a Russian resistance, she was going to have to step up. It didn't matter if all she wanted to do was bury herself in a chessboard. She was going to have to contribute. She was just going to have to figure out how. Chapter 9. Chessboard. Leo had just fallen asleep on the sofa when someone switched the light on. He suppressed a groan, blinking gritty eyes. He'd been awake long after everyone else had fallen asleep, his mind awhirl with Soviet invaders and mutant zombies. The snoring didn't help either. A bunk room with 5 other guys wasn't exactly a quiet place, which is why he'd moved to the living room couch. He rolled over and found Cassie sitting on the brick hearth. In her hands was a small rectangular box. She hadn't noticed him on the sofa. He watched her profile, tracing the line of her nose and cheekbone with his eyes. He admitted to himself that he felt drawn to her. There was something about her that ignited a spark inside him. She opened the box and began pulling out small figurines. It took Leo a moment to realize she was setting up a miniature chessboard. "Cassie?" She jumped in surprise, turning around as he sat up. Her eyes widened as she realized he'd been asleep on the sofa. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was out here. I'll turn the light off." She reached for the switch. "No, it's okay." Leo ran a hand through his shaggy hair, pushing it out of his eyes. "I came out here to get away from the snoring." "Me too." Amusement creased his brow. "There's snoring in your room? Who?" She stared at him, momentarily thrown off balance. "Not sure." She was lying. This also amused him. Whoever was snoring, Cassie wasn't going to rat them out. It was most likely his grandmother. "I thought about going outside," Cassie said. "You know, to play chess under the stars. But there are, like, bears and stuff out there. You know? Mountain lions and coyotes and other things. Probably zombies. I saw at least 56 places where predators could hide around the cabin. I've heard raccoons can have rabies." She rubbed at her arms. It took all his willpower not to chuckle, making a mental note that Cassie wasn't an outdoors type. That was okay. He could understand how the woods could be intimidating to someone who hadn't grown up with them. She was staring at him and absently running her hands through her hair. It was a lighter shade than Jennifer's, but no less pretty. "I got 50% of my mom's hair," Cassie said. "That's the curly part. The other half, the straight half, is from my dad. That's why it always looks like this. You know, not quite straight, but not quite curly either." Her hands got tangled in the long strands that fell past her shoulders. Leo thought her hair looked nice. He almost said so, but stopped himself. No matter what he thought about Cassie's hair, she was still Jennifer's little sister. I could really use a rubber band and some Aquanet. Well, he couldn't help her out on the Aquanet, but he was pretty sure there were rubber bands in the kitchen. He got up and rifled through the drawers until he found one. Cassie blinked at him in surprise when he handed her one. "Thank you." "Sure." She wadded her hair into a bun and secured it with the rubber band. Stray wisps framed her face. He really should try to get some sleep. They had a big day ahead of them with their mission to the Craig farm, but he found himself wanting to hang out with Cassie. Leo racked his brain for something to say. "Is that your chessboard?" He gestured to the small playing board on the hearth. "Yeah, I brought it with me from Amanda's." "You remembered to pack a chessboard while you were running for your life from zombies?" "I like chess." "Obviously." "Were you planning to play?" "Yeah." "Can I play a game with you?" She blinked and looked away, arranging the pieces on the board. "Russians invaded America and deployed a zombie virus," she muttered. "That's not any weirder than the varsity football captain hanging out with the chess nerd, is it?" He wasn't sure she'd realized she'd spoken aloud until he saw the flush crawl up her cheeks. "I'm just an apple farmer, Cassie." She snorted. "Sure you are. Have you ever played chess before?" "My dad used to play with us sometimes when we were kids. What do you call the castle pieces again?" "Rooks." "Right. And the horses?" Cassie drew in a long breath, her eyes locked on his face. "This just might be the weirdest moment of my life. And that's saying something because less than 24 hours ago, I plotted out an obstacle course for zombies." He was beginning to understand she talked a lot when she was nervous. He made her nervous, but that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. "You did what?" he asked. "I made an obstacle course for zombies. It's the only reason I made it alive out of Amanda's house." "What did you use for the obstacle course?" "Furniture and stuff. The door chain." She shook herself, returning her attention to the chessboard. Her finger stabbed at the various pieces. Knight, bishop, pawn, rook, king, queen. Remind me what they all do? It had probably been a decade since Leo had touched a chessboard, but Cassie didn't need to know that. She tapped the different pieces as she gave him a quick rundown of what each piece could do. The rooks can only move horizontally or vertically. The bishops can only move diagonally. "It's coming back to me now," he said when she finished. She stared at him. "You know I'm going to cream you." He raised a brow. He'd designed some pretty damn good football moves in his time. How different could this be? "You think so?" "Positive. Are you sure you want to play? Jennifer always said you had a competitive streak." She had him there. He leaned forward. "Give it all you got, Cassie Miola." She beat him in less than 5 minutes on the first game. "You won? Already?" He frowned at the board. "Mm-hmm." The triumphant grin she gave him was mesmerizing. It was clear she liked winning. Leo liked to win, too, although he didn't particularly mind losing to Cassie. He realized he was staring and shifted his gaze back to the chessboard. She swept up the pieces and restored the board. "Do you want to play again?" Did she think he was going to slink away with his tail between his legs? Yes. It took her only a handful of moves to clobber him a second time. "I didn't know it was possible to lose a game in 8 moves," Leo said. "It was 4, actually," Cassie said. "A move is considered 2 plays, 1 from each side, so I actually beat you in 4 moves." He liked that she didn't pull any punches with him. "I think you just told me I'm a real shitty player." "Just at chess." Cassie's eyes were bright with amusement. "What I just did is a sequence called Scholar's Mate. Don't worry, if we were on the football field, you'd probably give me a concussion. You're getting off easy in comparison." He wasn't sure about that. His pride felt thoroughly concussed, although at the moment he wasn't bothered by this at all. He noticed a black knight pendant resting just above her heart. "Is that your favorite piece?" "Yeah." She rubbed the pendant between her fingers, smiling. "Jennifer gave it to me for my 16th birthday." "Why do you like the knight so much?" "Because a knight never moves in straight lines. It's not predictable, you know. A good game is never predictable." "If I'd known how good you are at strategy, I'd have convinced Coach Brown to let you design plays for the football team." Her eyes widened. Another flush crawled up her cheeks. Damn, she was pretty. And smart. He wasn't sure what he liked more about her. Cassie busied herself resetting the board. "Again, Jockface?" "Sure, Squirt." He hunched over the board to study it. He was determined to last more than 6 moves. He absorbed the different pieces, assigning them football positions. Pawns were like the linemen. They were the first line of defense and were more powerful as a unit than as individuals. The queen was like the running backs, versatile and useful in a variety of ways. The rooks were the tight ends. The bishops were the wide receivers. The king was like the quarterback, to be protected at all costs. Really, it wasn't that different. Or maybe it was vastly different. Cassie creamed him in less than 10 minutes on the next game. Leo smacked his knee in annoyance when she said, "Checkmate." "Damn. Explain to me how you did that." "I just used something called the Ruy Lopez opening on you." Both his eyebrows shot up. "There's a name for what you just did?" "Yeah. It's also known as the Spanish torture." She was messing with him. She had to be. "Explain it to me." "To get out of it, you needed to put the question to my bishop." "I needed to... what?" Cassie launched into a long-winded explanation, which had Leo frowning at her. Not only had she not been messing with him, but now she was talking circles around him. He attempted to focus on the lesson, but his eyes kept straying to the wisps of hair around her face and the graceful line of her neck. By the time she finished, he realized he hadn't heard the last 50% of whatever she'd said. "I'm glad I rescued you, Cassie." "Really? Even though I'm not very useful?" A shadow crossed her face that had nothing to do with fatigue. Her shoulders slumped, and she looked away. "That's the real reason I couldn't sleep. I was trying to figure out how I could make myself useful to a guerrilla army." "Are you kidding me? Look at you!" He gestured to her and the chessboard. "You're a strategist, Cassie. I'm officially putting you in charge of strategy. We're going to need strategy to stay ahead of the Russians and defeat them." She stared at him without speaking. She was silent for so long that Leo felt the skin between his shoulder blades itch. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She frowned. "You said, 'defeat the Russians.'" "So?" "You didn't say pester the Russians. You didn't say annoy the Russians. You said, 'defeat the Russians.' You know what I mean. You want," she counted on her fingers, "you want 11 adolescents and 1 grandma To defeat the Russians? We're not adolescents, Cassie. That's the part you're sticking on? Leo huffed in annoyance. Someone has to defend our country. You realize we're going to war with, like, half a board of players? But we're unexpected. That has to count for something. A little, I guess. She wrinkled her nose at him. Okay, I can work with that. Okay, meaning you'll help? Of course. Did you know Napoleon played chess? No. Was he good? She frowned at him. He conquered most of Europe. Leo supposed that made Napoleon a damn good chess player. Well, he didn't need to conquer all of Europe. He just wanted to protect West County. Maybe learning chess would help him do that. Want to play another game? He'd never beat her if they didn't keep playing. Sure, okay, but I'm not going to go easy on you. The smile she gave him was dazzling. It went through his body like a current of electricity. He found himself grinning back. I wouldn't like it if you went easy on me. Cassie, Leo? They turned as Jennifer padded into the room. She was dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, ready for the day's mission. She had volunteered to go to the Craig house this morning. Leo had been so absorbed with Cassie that he hadn't even noticed the windows lightening with the dawn. What are you guys doing? Jennifer asked. She sat down beside Cassie and put an arm around her shoulders. By the way the two girls leaned into one another, it was clear just how close they were. Leo was suddenly very conscious of how much he'd been enjoying himself with Cassie. He tried to hide it beneath an easy, casual smile. Neither of us could sleep, he said. Cassie just handed me my ass in chess 3 times, and then she tried to explain exactly how she obliterated me. Jennifer grinned, but he did not miss the way her eyes sharpened on him. Let me guess. Did you hear about the bird defense? Or the Steinitz defense? No. Leo met her eye, refusing to look guilty. He hadn't done anything inappropriate. There was something about a guy named Murphy and another guy named Rui. My sister is a genius, Jennifer said. Did you know she made it to the state chess championship tournament for the last 3 years? She beamed proudly at Cassie. No, I didn't know that, Leo said. And she always sees 3 to 5 moves ahead when she plays a game. Leo absorbed this. Could Cassie really see 3 to 5 moves ahead? In stupid person language, that meant she could anticipate the next 6 to 10 moves. There weren't even that many moves in a football play. His gaze flicked to Cassie for confirmation of this statement. She gave him a small nod. No wonder she creamed him. He couldn't stop the grin that stretched across his face. Cassie was the sniper's secret weapon. She's going to help us come up with strategies to use against the Russians, Leo told Jennifer. She didn't even blink at this statement. Cassie will be great at that. She has a good mind for strategy. I'm not used to people getting up before me. Nona entered the room. She didn't bother asking why they were all awake. Good. I can use some help in the kitchen. They broke apart then, each of them going in a different direction. Leo let his gaze linger on Cassie for only a moment, watching as she swept up her chess pieces and returned them to the little travel box. Then he caught Jennifer watching him. He turned his back on both sisters, marching outside to relieve himself. Chapter 10. Terms. Leo led the way down from Pole Mountain on a bike. Jennifer was right behind him, along with Anton, Bruce, and the Craig brothers. As they hit a smooth downhill, Jennifer picked up speed and caught up with Leo. He tried to outpace her, but one look at her profile was enough to tell him she was not going to be deterred. He knew what she was going to say before she said it. He could practically feel the words radiating off her. "I saw you looking at Cassie." Jennifer had never been one to beat around the bush. He decided to play dumb. "We were playing chess. That usually involves looking at someone. You know what I'm talking about. You like her. I just met her less than a day ago. You've known her since we were in high school. You know what I mean. She was just a scruffy kid back then. Don't bullshit me, Leo. There's no timeline on chemistry. I saw the way you looked at her." He grit his teeth, not in the mood for confrontation. "Nothing inappropriate happened. We have a mission to focus on, Jennifer." "So, you admit you like her?" He kept his mouth shut, refusing to walk into her trap. "I'm not going to play your game. She's your little sister. I respect that, and I respect Cassie. I just want to hear you say it." "Say what?" "That you like her. Tell me you like her." "Damn it, Jennifer." He glared at her. "We don't have time for this shit. In case you forgot, we're in the middle of a war. Tell me you like her. She's neat, okay? And smart. Is that what you want to hear?" A smug, pleased smile split Jennifer's face. "And you sort of liked it when she kicked your ass at chess, didn't you?" Leo huffed. Jennifer just grinned. "I knew it. Cassie always had a crush on you, you know." Leo didn't respond. Now that Jennifer brought it up, he recalled the way Cassie had always stared at him whenever he came over to their house. She'd go out of her way to talk to him, even if all she did was call him Jockface. Even back then, it occurred to him she had a crush on him, though he hadn't thought much of it at the time. "You didn't even notice, did you?" Jennifer snorted. "Why would you? Every girl in Bastapole High had a crush on the great Leo Cecchino. Now you're just being an ass. Whatever. You know it's true. You have my permission." "Your what?" "Permission to date my sister." Once again, Leo's head snapped in Jennifer's direction. He was in serious danger of giving himself whiplash. One look at Jennifer's face told him she was dead serious. "Why?" he said at last. "Because," Jennifer shrugged, "we could all be dead tomorrow. If you like Cassie, do something about it. I don't want either of you beating around the bush on my account." "I just met her." "We've been over this already. Look, remember that guy I told you about? Brad." Leo wasn't likely to forget that particular conversation anytime soon. "Yeah, Brad. I knew within 5 minutes of meeting him that he was the guy for me." Leo didn't know what to say to this. Back in high school, he'd been convinced Jennifer was the only girl on the planet for him. Hearing her admit that she'd never felt the same should have been a blow to his ego. He was surprised to realize it didn't bother him at all anymore. "Are you telling me you believe in love at first sight?" "I'm just saying this doesn't have to be complicated. When you know, you know." Leo let his mind drift back to earlier that morning when he'd played chess with Cassie. If he were being honest, he'd felt electric beside her, and he had loved it when she handed him his ass over the chessboard. That was sexy as hell. Even if he didn't like losing, Losing to Cassie was all right. That's what I thought, Jennifer said, watching his face. You know. You've never been a guy to go halfway, Leo. Just know that if you hurt her, I'll stab you through the heart with my stiletto. I still have them, you know. The red ones I was wearing when I got here. I remember. It was humanly impossible to forget those shoes. He'd watched her kill a zombie with them. Good. Then be a gentleman and I won't have to hurt you with them. Leo wasn't sure he could stand this conversation any longer. Can we stop talking now? No. There's one more thing. What else? He asked, exasperated. Don't try to sideline her. What are you talking about? You heard me. Cassie is smart and capable. She has a lot to contribute to this war. War. When had they started using that word? Had it been last night? As much as Leo didn't like it, he knew it was the right word. You can't sideline Cassie just because you want to keep her safe. I know you, Leo. Now she was just pissing him off. Fine. Are we done now? Sure, so long as we're clear on the terms. I be nice to Cassie, and you won't stab me with your shoe. Was that the gist of the conversation? Jennifer chuckled. Yep, that's it. Pretty simple. Leo jerked his handlebars to the left, riding away from Jennifer. He cut down a steep grassy slope, heading toward a switchback in the road. He needed space to clear his head. He thought back to the past few years. There'd been a few dates here and there, but nothing serious. Hell, he couldn't even remember the names of the few girls he'd gone out with. None of them had meant anything. He hadn't felt anything for a girl in nearly 3 years. Yet, he'd only become reacquainted with Cassie for a day. It was too early to leap to conclusions, no matter what Jennifer said. He was beginning to think she was crazy anyway. But Jennifer was right about one thing. Leo had felt something, whatever it was, when he first rode onto the Nielsen property and saw Cassie. The sight of her skewering the zombie with that piece of rebar was a sight he'd never forget. She was fierce, brave, smart, and beautiful. Taking a deep gulp of air, Leo put Cassie Miola firmly out of his mind. He'd figure things out about her later. He steered his bike back onto the dirt road and turned his mind to their mission. It was time to visit the Craig cattle farm. Chapter 11. Spies. Leo brought everyone to a stop as they reached the edge of the Cicchino property. They had to pedal a short half-mile down the highway to get to the Craig farm. They would be out in the open and exposed. They stood in silence, listening for any sounds of danger. Soft wind, chirping birds, the whine of the cicadas. Nothing out of the ordinary. No cars or gunshots. All right, Leo said. Let's move out. We ride in pairs. Stick together. Jennifer rode beside him. The Craig brothers rode behind them, with Anton and Bruce bringing up the rear. They reached the entrance to the Craig farm without incident. Jim and Tate pulled ahead, anxious to see their parents. Leo pulled out his binoculars, looking in the direction of the 2-story house tucked on the back corner of the property beside the milking barn. See anything? Anton pulled up alongside him. Just Mr. Craig and his dog herding the next group of cows in for their daily milking, Leo replied. 10 minutes later, they pulled into the front yard of the Craig farm. They arrived to find Mrs. Craig in tears as she hugged her 2 sons. Mr. Craig was also there, the 4 of them standing in a tight circle, on the porch. Leo felt his throat tighten at the sight of the family together. Without realizing it, he glanced over at Anton. His little brother watched the reunion with a look of mixed emotions. He was happy to see the Craigs reunited, but it was a reminder that both their parents were gone. Leo felt the same way. He edged over to Anton and elbowed him in the ribs. Anton grinned and elbowed him back. A rare, silent moment of brotherly affection ran between them. "I knew you were with the Chiquinos." Mr. Craig turned to his wife. "Didn't I tell you they were with Leo?" After being rescued from Russian kidnappers, Tate had come up with the idea to spray paint the word snipers into the grass. It was the direct translation for Chiquino. He'd hoped his parents would understand he and Jim had gone to the Chiquino farm. Looks like it had worked. Mrs. Craig wiped happy tears from her face. "It seemed too much to hope for." She came down the steps and seized Leo in a hug. "Thanks for rescuing my boys. How's your father?" Leo stiffened without meaning to. Mrs. Craig pulled back and studied his face. Her eyes rounded with sadness. "Mr. Chiquino sacrificed himself to help Dal and Lena get out of Rossi when the Soviets first attacked," Jim said quietly. Mr. Craig blew out a breath. "May he rest in peace. You kids better get inside before anyone sees you," Mrs. Craig said. "The Russians came yesterday, but we shouldn't take any chances. I have fresh-baked carrot muffins." She had them stash their bikes in the barn before herding them all inside. The Craig family home had been built in the early 1900s. It had been added onto over the years, each room reflecting the era in which it had been built. The most modern room was the spacious kitchen. A big scarred wooden table sat in the center of the room. Mr. Craig had brought in fresh milk, while Mrs. Craig set out the muffins. "We heard Dal's broadcast from Rossi," Mrs. Craig said. "I can't tell you how good it was to hear an American voice on the radio waves. All we get is that filthy Russian propaganda." "What are you talking about?" Jim asked. "You haven't heard?" Mr. Craig switched on a tiny radio that sat on the kitchen counter. Leo remembered him using it to listen to baseball games when they were kids. Mr. Craig adjusted the volume, letting a thick Russian accent fill the cozy kitchen. "The United States of America is no more. This land has been claimed by Mother Russia. Do not resist, and you will not be harmed." The message looped. Leo's hands fisted so tightly he heard his knuckles crack. Rage nearly choked him. "It was quite a coup to snag those few minutes on the airwaves," Mr. Craig said, switching off the radio. "How did you guys do it?" Jim gave his dad an abbreviated version of their mission into Sebastopol. He played up the good parts and omitted most of the dangerous parts. Mr. Craig looked ready to burst with pride by the time Jim finished. His wife's eyes were wet with worry, but the smile she gave her sons was one of pride. "You did America proud," Mr. Craig said. "Too bad you don't have a way to make more broadcasts. America could use a voice in the darkness. It gives people hope." "Actually, we do have something in the works," Leo said. "We hope to start regular broadcasts soon. With any luck, Stevenson and Dal would have the antenna and transmitter attached to his dad's truck and ready for prime time later today." When they made the broadcast in Sebastopol, Leo's only thought had been to disseminate their information about zombies and Russians to as many people as possible. He hadn't thought about it from a morale standpoint. It now seemed more important than ever to get broadcasts out to the people. "You guys need to know what else is going on," Anton said. He told them about the roundup they'd seen yesterday, while Leo filled them in on the mutant zombie. "Mutant zombies and Russian roundups. Things just keep getting worse." Mr. Craig ran a hand through his thinning hair. Leo realized how exhausted the older man was. It couldn't be easy running the farm without the help of his sons. "We were wondering if you guys had heard about any of this from the Russians when they came to take supplies from the farm. Any information you have could help." "Sorry, son," Mr. Craig said. "They speak mostly Russian when they come here." "How many times have the Russians come back?" Tate asked. "Those bastards come like clockwork every other day to steal from us." Mr. Craig's face was tight as he passed around the milk pitcher. "You two are wanted for murder." This statement was directed at Jim and Tate. The Craig brothers sobered at this declaration. "There is one Russian who speaks a little English," their mother said. "He questioned us last time he was here. They suspect the two of you somehow managed to get the better of the soldiers who kidnapped you. They think you burned the trucks to fake your deaths. They threatened to turn your father over to the KGB." Mrs. Craig kept her attention on her muffin plate as she spoke. "The KGB?" Leo sat up straight. This was the first time they'd had any indication the KGB was in America. "Of course," Mr. Craig said bitterly. "You didn't think the Soviets would launch an invasion without the KGB, did you? Luckily, we're the only local dairy farm. It's a thin safety net." Mrs. Craig pulled her muffin apart without eating it. "It's the only reason we're still alive." "You should come back with us to the Chiquino cabin." Jim's fists were white-knuckled on the tabletop. "It's not safe here." "It's not safe anywhere," Mr. Craig countered. "Besides, we have a certain strategic advantage if we stay here. Maybe we'll overhear something important." "But you said they mostly speak Russian when they're here," Jim said. "They do, but you never know. We may be able to learn something important." Mrs. Craig looked to her husband for support. "Now that I'm thinking about it, we actually heard them talking about Westville when they were here. That's where you said the roundup was, right?" "It was." Leo pursed his lips. "Too bad neither of us speaks Russian," Mr. Craig said. All eyes went to Leo and Anton. "Lena needs to be here the next time the Russians come." "Leave it to Jennifer to call out the elephant in the room." "No way," Anton said. "Lena is probably the only person in 3 counties who can understand Russian," Jennifer said. "If we want to get the jump on the Soviets, we need to spy on them. There's got to be some place she can hide to eavesdrop on them the next time they come." "Jennifer is right," Mrs. Craig said. "If you want better information on the Russians, Lena needs to be here when they come. We can hide her under the house. No one will ever see her." "Spying from our cattle farm isn't safe for anyone," Jim said to his parents. "Our actions could be traced back to you guys." "You already said the KGB had their eyes on you," Tate added. "It's too dangerous." "This is our home." Mrs. Craig pressed both palms to the table and leaned forward to stare down her sons. "It's our duty to protect it. We all have to join the fight in whatever manner we can. For your father and me, this is how we fight. We run the farm. We help you get information." "I agree with your mother on this." Mr. Craig took his wife's hand. "We all do our part in this war." The table fell quiet. Jim and Tate Both looked uneasy. Leo sympathized with them. It couldn't be easy for them to know their parents were putting themselves in harm's way. "Everyone is at risk," Jennifer said. "The Russians are here. Whether we fight or hide, we're all in danger. All we can do is choose how we want to exist. We have to leave the rest up to fate." Leo raised an eyebrow at her, but didn't comment. She wasn't wrong. "It's settled," Mrs. Craig said. "The Russians come again the day after tomorrow. Have Lena here by dawn. We'll make sure she's safe."
Would you like to listen to this unabridged audiobook without commercials? Head over to my online store at Authors Direct, where all of my audiobooks are $7.99 or less. You can download the free Authors Direct app to listen to the story on the go, or you can listen directly on your computer using their online listening device. The link to my Authors Direct store is in the show notes. Thanks so much.
Chapter 12. Chess Club. "So, let me get this straight. You hardwired the transmitter to the truck through the stereo." For emphasis, Dal towed the car radio that now sat on the ground by his feet. "You hardwired the antenna to the car battery. As long as the car battery is on, the transmitter and the antenna will work?" "Yep." Stevenson frowned critically at his work, clearly not thrilled with it. Cassie could understand why. Stevenson's work was acceptable, but it was anything but neat. He liked his electrical projects to be neat. There were quite a few wires strung across the cab of Mr. Cecchino's truck. The transmitter sat on the front seat. One wire disappeared into the box that used to hold the radio. The other went out the cab window to the antenna, which, at the moment, lay in the back of the truck bed. The plan was for someone to hold it up in the air when it was time for the broadcast. There was yet another wire from the antenna that went down the front windshield and disappeared under the hood. "I could have done a better job if there'd been more to work with," Stevenson said. "This looks like it was done by an idiot with a blindfold on." "Who cares how it looks?" Lena said. "You got this whole thing set up in less than 2 hours. That's radical." A timid smile lit Stevenson's face. He, Amanda, and Cassie were all seniors like Lena, but that didn't mean they'd ever interacted much with her. Her status as Anton's twin put her on a social status rung that was miles above the 3 chess club kids. She could have been popular if she hadn't been so into the world peace and anti-nuke stuff. If Lena was aware or cared about any of this, she didn't give any outward sign. "We need to test this out," she said. "Dal, let's go make a broadcast." At Dal's nod, she turned to Stevenson. "You should come with us to make sure everything works." Stevenson threw a panicked look at Amanda and Cassie. "We'll go with you," Cassie said. Stevenson blanched. That clearly wasn't the help he'd been looking for. Cassie didn't let him off the hook. This was his chance to contribute. "Yeah, Cassie and I will go with you," Amanda said. She shot Stevenson a fierce frown, letting him know he wasn't being given a choice. "Okay, I guess," he muttered. "Any of you guys know how to use a gun?" Dal asked. I know the basic theory," Amanda said. "You point at things and pull the trigger." Dal and Lena exchanged looks. He had an arm around Lena's waist. Cassie wondered how long they'd been a couple. "We probably won't need to shoot anything where we're going," Lena said to him. "We're taking a dirt road to that mountain over there." She gestured in a vague northern direction toward a scattering of small mountain peaks. It was impossible to know which one she was talking about. There's not much of a chance that we'll run into anyone. Yeah, so long as the Russians don't initiate flight patrols, Stevenson muttered. Cassie's mouth went dry at the thought of getting shot to pieces by Russians in an airplane, but she kept her mouth shut. There hadn't been any air patrols yet. She had to hope their luck held. Dal eyed the three of them. "We should take some of the machine guns," he said at last. 15 minutes later, Cassie found herself seated in the back of the pickup with Amanda, Stevenson, the antenna, and no less than 3 Russian-issued machine guns. "How do we know those things won't go off when we hit a pothole?" Stevenson asked. "The safeties are on," Dal said from the front seat, firing up the engine. "Make sure you take them off if you need to shoot anything." He shifted the truck into drive and started down the main dirt road they used to come and go from the cabin. Nona waved goodbye from the porch. "Should we leave her alone?" Stevenson asked. "Maybe I should stay behind. You know, just in case any zombies or Russians show up." Lena's laugh carried to them from the front seat. "Nona's a good shot with a rifle. She'll be fine. Besides, Leo and the others will be back soon." She turned in the seat, looking back at them through the open cab window. "How come everyone calls you Stevenson anyway? Back in 5th grade, you went by Jeff." Stevenson's eyes widened. Cassie wasn't sure if he was more surprised that Lena remembered they were in 5th grade together, or that she remembered his real name was Jeff. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "He changed his name in 6th grade, Amanda supplied. "When he joined the school band, there were 2 other Jeffs in the class. To keep everyone from getting confused, the teacher started calling them by their last names." "It stuck after that," Cassie said. "Now everyone calls him Stevenson." Lena nodded thoughtfully before turning away. Cassie and the others watched the back of her head, waiting to see if she was going to turn around and talk to them again. When she didn't, the 3 of them leaned together. "We know we have no business being on a mission, right?" Stevenson said. "I mean, the only reason we survived Amanda's house is because Dal and Leo saved us." "I know." Amanda wrung her hands. "We should use science terms to make ourselves sound smart so they won't think we're useless. We could talk about lattice and lanthanides at dinner in front of everyone." "We are smart," Cassie said, trying to be optimistic. "I think we can do this. All we have to do is keep watch and make sure the broadcasting equipment works." "What do we know about keeping watch?" Stevenson countered. Cassie decided to apply Leo's logic. "We just treat the situation like a chessboard. Make sure we're always thinking 3 to 5 moves ahead." "You're the only one of us who can see that far ahead," Amanda said. "The best we can manage is 2 to 3 moves." "That doesn't matter," Cassie said. "The point is, we're good at seeing the big picture. We just have to do that." "You want us to apply chess logic to Russian invaders and ravenous zombies?" Stevenson snorted. "You're crazy, Cassie. It's not even the same thing." "Of course it is," Cassie said, though secretly she wasn't so sure. She was just trying to make her friends feel better. She played with her black knight pendant, rolling it between her fingers. If only she was as sure of herself in real life as she was on the chessboard. She'd be more confident if she weren't terrified of the weapon pile at their feet. Maybe she'd ask for some shooting lessons when they got back. For all of Leo's talk about her being a strategist, she'd feel a whole lot more useful if she knew how to use a gun. Dal turned off the main road, cutting through a wide meadow. As the truck bumped over the uneven ground, Stevenson nudged the machine guns with his shoe, turning them so that the barrels pointed away from the three of them. Cassie pressed her feet to the floor to keep her butt from bouncing up and down. "What if they throw us out?" Stevenson said. "What if they figure out we're useless and dump us somewhere to fend for ourselves?" "If we get desperate, we can always offer to take care of laundry and cleaning," Amanda said. "Even a guerrilla army needs clean clothes." "Yeah, I guess so." Despite his words, Stevenson didn't sound convinced. Cassie understood their fears. It was hard to feel useful when confronted with the snipers. They were like seasoned soldiers. In high school, they'd all been popular and athletic. There were a lot of reasons the chess club never hung out with the varsity kids. It was like trying to mix oil and water. Leo hadn't seemed to have any doubts about her usefulness when she'd played chess with him. He'd been dead serious when he'd named her official strategist. She only hoped she could live up to his expectations. Cassie had secretly replayed their time over the chessboard at least 237 times in her head. She was crushing on him big time. Hell, she'd been crushing on him since freshman year. She tried not to read into the fact that he'd seemed to enjoy playing chess with her, even when she kicked his ass. She still wasn't sure why she'd done that. No, that wasn't true. She'd done it because she'd been nervous as hell and babbling like an idiot. Creaming him at chess felt like evening the field, so to speak. Crushing on Leo was stupid for several reasons. A, he was Jennifer's ex. B, they'd probably get back together any day now. Why wouldn't they? They were Jennifer and Leo, for crying out loud. C, even if point A and B weren't true, guys like Leo didn't go for girls like Cassie. Period. And D, just because he was nice to her didn't mean he liked her. See points A, B, and C for further clarification. A particularly deep pothole rammed Cassie's back into the side of the truck. It was painful enough to jar her from her thoughts. She decided it was best to bury her crush in a deep part of her mind. That was the only sensible thing to do. Stevenson spoke up, thankfully diverting Cassie from thoughts of Leo. "I was listening to the radio with Nona yesterday," Stevenson said. "Did you know the Soviets are pumping out propaganda every hour? They keep saying we're all part of New Russia, when in fact they're rounding us up and infecting us." "That's why Dal and Lena need to make their broadcasts," Cassie said. "They're making sure people know the truth of what's going on. Helping them is important work." She leaned on this last part so they could all feel like they were making a contribution to the war effort. From the weak smiles she received, she knew they got the point. Dal cut over 2 more hills and met up with another dirt road. He turned onto it and kept driving. There were cows scattered across the rolling hillsides. They bumped along the dirt road for nearly an hour before Dal finally stopped the truck. He set the parking brake on a tall hillside. The top was covered in dry, yellow grass. Oak trees draped the hillsides around them. A cow had wandered up near the top. It stared at them warily, ears flicked forward as it chewed a mouthful of grass. Lena got out of the truck, the Russian machine gun resting easily on her shoulder. She looked completely badass. "Where are we?" Cassie asked her. "The Kaysen property," Lena replied. "It borders our property on the north side. The owners don't live here. They lease the land for cattle grazing." Cassie jumped out of the truck and landed beside Lena. She gave the other girl her perkiest smile. "What can we do to help?" "We need Stevenson in the truck with Dal to make sure everything goes smoothly with the transmission," Lena replied. "You and Amanda can each grab a gun. We'll keep watch around the perimeter." Cassie and Amanda exchanged covert looks before gingerly picking up machine guns, or at least they thought they were being covert. Lena smiled at them in amusement. "Don't worry, I'd never fired one of these things until a few days ago either. The recoil is nasty, but once you figure out how to compensate for it, it's pretty easy," said the girl who had grown up hunting on a farm with her brothers, Cassie thought. "How about a shooting lesson while the guys get things set up?" Lena offered. Cassie had a mental vision of Leo standing by while she gunned down a few zombies. "That sounds great," she said. Amanda said, Do you guys need someone to take care of laundry? I can do that." "Girls are good for more than laundry," Lena said. "You need to know how to defend yourself." She sounded like she'd been hanging out with Jennifer. Jen was a rabid feminist. Cassie thought she overdid it, although that never seemed to deter the hordes of guys wanting to date her. "I'm not sure I'm cut out to be a gunslinger," Amanda said. "I'm a science geek." "Good. Then you can help Nona make explosives when we get back to the cabin," Lena said. "In the meantime, you can learn how to keep yourself alive. Come on." Cassie pushed her shoulders back and marched resolutely after Lena. Amanda followed at a slower pace. Back in the truck, she heard Stevenson say, "I should have brought a stopwatch. We need to keep the transmission under 60 seconds to make sure we aren't tracked." "Just use my Timex," Dal replied, handing Stevenson the watch from his wrist. This was a bit like handing an Olympic runner a cheap pair of shoes from the thrift store, but Cassie kept this comment to herself. Lena took Amanda and Cassie 100 yards down the north slope. "This is a good spot to practice," she said. "Now put the straps over your shoulder. That way you don't risk losing your gun if you drop it." "Like this?" Amanda asked. "Like it's a purse?" "Pretty much," Lena said. "Now rest the butt against your hip. That will help you balance against the recoil." Cassie pursed her lips in concentration as she followed Lena's instructions. She felt like an imposter the entire time. She really wanted to impress Leo, but who was she kidding? Chess nerds didn't shoot Soviet machine guns. Amanda was right. They should be doing laundry. Machine gun fire ripped through her ears. Bullets sprayed through the air. Several of them thudded into a large boulder 50 feet downhill. "Whoa!" Amanda rocked back on her heels, cheeks flushed. "Did you see that?" "Nice," Lena grinned at her. "Adjust your back leg. That will give you better balance and keep your aim steady. Good. Now try again." Cassie watched in astonishment as Amanda opened fire a second time. This time, she took aim at an oak tree. She squealed in excitement when 2 of her bullets actually hit the trunk. "That's it." Lena turned to Cassie. "Your turn." "Just imagine you're shooting Soviets," Amanda said. "It's a lot easier that way." Cassie decided to imagine she was a rook on the chessboard. Rooks always traveled in straight lines. God knew she needed all the help she could get to keep her bullets straight. She took aim at the oak tree, imagining herself as a black rook aiming for the white king. "Safety off," Lena said. Cassie pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly threw her on her ass. Bullets rippled through the leaves of the tree, but missed the trunk altogether. "Adjust your stance like this." Lena adjusted Cassie's right leg back and pressed the butt of the gun into her hip. "There. Try again. You too, Amanda." Under Lena's guidance, the 2 girls continued to practice. Cassie felt a thrill of exhilaration when her first bullet hit the tree. "I did it!" she cried. "Nice. Now do it again," Lena said. An image of Leo's face floated in her mind. Cassie imagined him watching her as she fired. Her next shots went right into the tree. She shifted and aimed at the boulder. Amanda let up a whoop as Cassie's bullets thudded into the stone. "Awesome!" Amanda cried. "I knew you guys were good for more than laundry," Lena said dryly. "Try again. The more you practice, the better you'll get." The girls spent a few more minutes practicing before Dal's tall figure appeared on the hilltop above them. "We're ready to make the broadcast." "Okay." Lena turned to Cassie and Amanda. "Come on, we need to keep watch. Put your safeties back on so you don't accidentally shoot anyone." Chapter 13. Decoy. Cassie was assigned to the southwest side of the hilltop. She reminded herself she wasn't a badass like Lena just because she'd fired a machine gun half a dozen times. But maybe, just maybe, she was on her way there. She scanned the land. Out here, there was no sign of civilization, no sign of the Russian invasion and the zombie apocalypse either. The few cows dotting the land were downright cute. She could almost imagine life was normal, if not for the Soviet machine gun in her hands. Nope, life was definitely not normal. Dal's voice carried in the wind behind her. "This is DJ Sniper coming to you live from the Soviet invasion in West County, California." Stevenson crouched beside Dal, the Timex gripped in both hands. "We have two important pieces of information to relay to everyone out there," Dal said. "First off, you all need to know the Russians have been rounding up people with the purpose to infect them with the Nezhet virus." Dal had a nice radio voice. It was smooth and deep and even. It was a sharp juxtaposition to the hard facts that fell from his mouth. Cassie kept her attention on the land. 2 hills away, she spotted a small cow crest the rise. Unlike the other animals out there, who all grazed lazily without a care in the world, this one was running. What the heck? She squinted, watching as the cow galloped in their direction. The thing ate up the distance like a puma. Some of the other cows lifted curious heads to watch the newcomer. The animal moved on all fours, but now that she was really looking at it, she realized it wasn't a cow. It was too small. It was wiry and all black with a misshapen hump on its back. What the hell was it? A big sheepdog? Her heart seized in her chest. Holy shit! That wasn't a dog. "Guys?" She raised her machine gun, hands trembling as the full impact of the situation took hold of her. God, she was such an idiot. "There's a mutant zombie coming this way." Realizing she sounded like a mouse, she summoned her voice. "Guys, mutant!" "What?" Stevenson shrieked. He dropped the Timex and gripped his head in terror. "Help me!" Cassie cried. She locked her gaze on the galloping zombie. It was less than 100 yards away. She opened fire. Bullets peppered the air. She had no idea if they landed anywhere near the mutant. She aimed as best she could. The zombie ducked down behind a boulder. Shit. "Guys, help!" She spun around, but forgot to take her finger off the trigger. Bullets ripped up the back bumper of the truck. Stevenson screamed and went down. "I've been shot!" he shrieked. Dal leaped out of the truck. With a machine gun gripped in one hand and his dark hair hanging around his face, he pretty much looked like Rambo. "Cassie, look out!" Cassie spun back around just in time to see the mutant hurl a rock through the air. No, not just a rock. It was a stone roughly the size of a human head, and it was coming right toward her. She leaped out of the way just as Dal opened fire. The rock smashed into the ground right where she'd been standing. Dal's bullets thudded into the giant boulder where the mutant hid. More giant rocks sailed in their direction. One of them smacked into the side of the truck. No way should anything be able to throw rocks that big, let alone so far. "Take cover," Dal yelled. Cassie was sweaty with terror, but she held her ground. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Amanda helping Stevenson out of the truck. His foot was bleeding. The two of them scuttled under the truck with the antenna, keeping it out of harm's way. "Cassie!" Lena cried. She and Dal had taken cover behind the back of the truck as more boulders rained down. Cassie saw everything in a blink. They were in deep shit. There were several reasons for this. A. There was a ton of rocks out there. The mutant pretty much had an endless supply of ammunition. B. The mutant was intelligent. Not only was he using a big boulder for cover, he had figured out how to weaponize rocks. C. He could destroy their truck with enough of those rocks. If that happened, the portable broadcasting system they'd worked so hard to create would be stranded. They would be stranded out here. The answer was simple. She saw it all in a flash, like she did in a chess game. Someone had to draw the mutant into the open so Lena and Dal could shoot him. It was the only way to protect the truck. Cassie knew what she had to do, even though it scared the living crap out of her. She didn't give herself time to think about it. "Lena! Dal!" she cried. "Cover me!" She sprinted down the hill, screaming at the top of her lungs. She raced straight toward the boulder, hoping her approach would draw out the mutant. Her plan worked. The mutant's head popped up from behind the boulder. As soon as he saw her, he sprang out of hiding. He sailed right over the boulder and hit the ground running, coming straight for Cassie. She prayed Dal and Lena were damn good shots. Cassie dropped to the ground, covering her head with her hands. Bullets ripped by on either side of her. Cassie couldn't stop screaming. She braced herself for impact. Whether from the mutant or stray bullets, she wasn't sure. Silence. Her ears buzzed with the aftershock of the gunfire. Cassie dared raise her head. The mutant, no more than 10 feet away from her, was dead. Dark blood poured out of his body, sinking into the earth. He looked like he'd been shot more than a dozen times. Was it really dead? Cassie crept toward it, gripped her machine gun. When she was 5 feet away, she pulled the trigger. Bullets tore into the body, sending droplets of blood flying upward. Panting, she lowered the gun. "Cassie?" She jumped. Lena and Dal were beside her. "Are you nuts?" Lena grabbed her in a brief hug. "What the hell was that?" "Someone had to draw him out." Cassie's voice shook. "Otherwise, he would have ruined our radio station. It was the only way." "Don't do that again, okay?" Dal patted her on the back. "You scared the shit out of us." Cassie just nodded. She couldn't take her eyes off the mutant corpse. The muscles of his legs had grown so large that most of his pants had ripped away. Skin crisscrossed with poisoned veins was exposed. The same had happened with his arms and torso. Unlike the other mutant they'd seen, this one's muscles had expanded evenly. The distended hump on his back was huge. "He looks like a zombified Incredible Hulk," Lena said. "Wait, what's it doing out here in the middle of nowhere?" Cassie asked. "I think that might be Mr. Peterson," Dal said. "These are his cattle. I recognize his belt buckle." It was one of the few articles of clothing still intact, though it was covered with so much blood that Cassie wasn't sure how Dal could see well enough to recognize it. "I guess I guess we can officially say mutant zombies are not a fluke, she said. They're smarter than regular zombies. This one had an attack plan. Lena and Dal gave her tight looks. A long wail from Stevenson carried down the slope. I've been shot! Cassie jerked around. Crap! She'd forgotten about Stevenson. She raced back up the hillside with Dal and Lena. They found him rolling on the ground beside the truck. His foot was a bloody mess. Amanda was trying to get his shoe off. Cassie's lungs stopped working. She'd shot her friend. We need to get him back to Nona, Dal said. Stevenson's shouting abruptly cut off. His body went limp on the ground. I think he fainted, Amanda said. Oh, God, Cassie whispered. She couldn't stop staring at Stevenson's bloody foot. She had done that. Would he still be able to walk? It was an accident, Lena said. Come on, we have to get him back to Nona. They lifted Stevenson's bony form into the back of the truck. Cassie cradled his head on her lap while Amanda wrestled the shoe and sock off his wounded foot. It doesn't look too bad, she said, heedless of the blood that got on her clothes and hands. She'd never been squeamish in biology when they had to dissect frogs either. I think your bullet hit his little toe. Use his other sock to stanch the bleeding as best you can, Dal said. He threw the truck in reverse and turned it around. Seconds later, they were driving back to the cabin. Amanda wrapped Stevenson's wounded foot with his good sock. When she was done, she leaned back against the back of the cab. He'll be okay, she told Cassie. You know him. He just doesn't take pain well. I shot our friend. Cassie still struggled to process this. She felt terrible. You also risked your life to draw the mutant out into the open, Amanda replied. She glanced at a clump of trees they passed. I wish I'd had a chance to see it up close. What did it look like? It took Cassie a moment to realize she was talking about the mutant. She described it as best she could. Amanda shuddered. It must be a virus mutation. The scariest part is that it actually displayed intelligence. I mean, that thing launched an assault on us. A regular zombie wouldn't have done that. I know. Cassie smoothed one hand over Stevenson's forehead. It was definitely better that he was unconscious. At least this way, he wasn't feeling his messed up foot. Lena told me the Russians have some sort of vaccine that makes them immune to the zombies, Amanda said. Some sort of repellent that keeps the zombies from attacking them. I wonder if that also applies to the mutants. Cassie shrugged. She wasn't in the mood to talk about the mutants anymore. Did Dal finish his broadcast before the mutant attacked? Most of it, Amanda said. Anyone listening knows to keep an eye out for them. Well, that was something. At least this mission hadn't been a waste. They'd accomplished what they'd set out to do. Except they now had more information the people needed to hear. Not only are the mutants strong, but they're smart, Cassie said. That one was smart enough to stay out of gun range. Dal will have to tell that to the people in the next broadcast, Amanda agreed. They lapsed into silence as the truck bounced its way over the uneven ground back to the cabin. Cassie kept her eyes peeled for mutants the entire way. Her hands never stopped smoothing Stevenson's hair across his forehead. Chapter 14. Trade. Leo wasn't sure which fact was more disturbing, the fact that Cassie had shot off Stevenson's little toe, or the fact that she'd charged a mutant zombie with the intention of drawing him out into the open. Leo had to go outside while Nona cleaned and bandaged Stevenson's little toe. He was a complete wreck. The kid wouldn't stop crying. It was too hard to watch. Leo wasn't used to guys like Stevenson. He was delicate. Jennifer and Tate were busy trying to liquor him up with shots of grappa. The other chess girl, Amanda, was helping Nona. As he stepped onto the porch, he caught sight of Cassie's curly hair disappearing beneath the cabin. He followed her without a thought. He arrived in time to see the door to the storage room close. While it occurred to him that Cassie might want privacy, it wasn't every day you accidentally shot your friend, Leo instinctively barged in after her. He was treated to one look of her tear-streaked, devastated face before she stiffened and turned her back on him. "Cassie, I need to be alone for a few minutes, please." Her voice came out shaky and strained. He could tell she was making an effort not to break down in front of him. He hesitated. She had asked him to go. Stevenson's screaming from upstairs reached a new crescendo. Cassie flinched and hunched her shoulders, keeping her back to Leo. Screw this. He wasn't going to leave her down here to feel miserable about herself. "It was an accident, Cassie." She didn't say anything. Not a word. She was too busy sobbing. Leo stepped in front of her and pulled her into a hug. She tensed. He didn't let go. After a few seconds, she went limp and rested her forehead on his shoulder. His shirt grew damp as she cried. She shook in his arms as sobs racked her. Leo just held her. He figured it wouldn't matter if he pointed out that she'd saved everyone and the truck with her stunt. None of that changed the fact that she accidentally shot her friend. She hiccuped, "I need to learn how to use a gun. Will you teach me?" He tightened his grip on her. He liked the way she felt in his arms, though he wished the circumstances were different. "Of course. Tomorrow. How does that sound? I'll take you, Amanda, and Jennifer out for a few hours of practice. We'll go way out into the woods where the Russians won't hear us. We can get Anton to help. He's a great shot." "Thank you." He squeezed her. "Will you do something for me in return?" She lifted wet, red eyes to look at him. Her nose was no more than an inch from his. "What?" "I want you to give me chess lessons." He liked how tall she was. "I want to learn how to play like you." She blinked in surprise, a small dent appearing between her brows. "You want to learn to play like I play?" "Yeah. If chess was good enough for Napoleon, it was good enough for him." "Will you teach me?" She sniffed. "Okay, but just because I give you lessons doesn't mean you'll be able to beat me. I'm really good." He searched her eyes, trying to determine if she was cracking a joke. She wasn't. Her emotional state was making her blunt. "That's okay. I don't mind being beaten by you." Apparently, her emotional state was making him blunt, too. Their eyes locked. His gaze strayed to her lips. It took all his willpower not to kiss her on the mouth. He diffused the tension of the moment by kissing her on the forehead and pulling her back against his shoulder. It felt good when she relaxed against him. Jennifer was right. He liked Cassie. It didn't matter if he'd only just gotten reacquainted with her. She ignited a slow burn that went from the top of his head all the way down to his feet. He was pretty sure she liked him, too. But they were in the middle of a goddamn war. This wasn't exactly the time to date a girl. It wasn't like he could ask her to the movies. "Hey, Cassie, want to go kill some Soviets with me?" That wasn't any girl's idea of a good time. His either. She had quieted against him. Sobs no longer racked her body. Upstairs, Stevenson's cries had leveled off. "Come on, let's go check on Stevenson," he said. She nodded and pulled back from him. Leo reluctantly let her go. He watched as she dried her eyes on the sleeve of her shirt. The process left blood smeared across her eyebrow and forehead. "Here, wait." He cupped the back of her head and wiped the blood away, ignoring the way his heart leaped when she closed her eyes and relaxed into his grip. "There, all gone." He gave her shoulders a squeeze before releasing her. Her eyes opened, looking straight at him. "I don't know why my sister ever broke up with you. That was the stupidest thing she ever did." Red crept up her neck. She turned back and hurried away. Leo followed her, feeling glad she had asked him for shooting lessons. He didn't want anything to ever happen to her. Chapter 15. Lesson. The next day, Cassie awoke early, ready for her shooting lesson. Jennifer and Amanda got up with her, both of them eager to learn how to defend themselves. Stevenson opted to stay behind. Even though the sun hadn't fully risen, Nona put him to work peeling carrots in the kitchen. "Don't worry," he said to Cassie. "I don't need to learn how to shoot. By the time Leo is finished with you, you'll be able to protect me." "I'm so sorry about your foot," Cassie said for the 100th time. "It's okay." The smile he gave her was genuine, even though his face was wan from the ordeal. "It's not like anyone needs a pinky toe," Amanda elbowed Stevenson. "Besides, just think of all the girls you'll impress with a missing toe." If possible, Stevenson went even paler at this suggestion. Nona bustled over and inserted herself between Amanda and Stevenson. She plopped a cup of tea in front of him. "Willow bark. Drink," she ordered. Cassie and the other girls went outside to where Leo and Anton had the 3 horses waiting. "Jennifer, are you okay to ride a horse by yourself?" Leo asked. "Yes, Mr. Quarterback," Jennifer replied. "I can handle a horse." She jumped astride the stocky mare Leo usually rode. She made it look easy. Leo rolled his eyes, but didn't comment on the snide remark. Cassie watched the exchange intently. All she saw was the 2 of them annoying one another like siblings. It baffled her. "Amanda, ride with Anton," Leo said. "Cassie, you're with me." Cassie threw a quick glance at her sister to see how she would react to this. Jennifer didn't appear to be paying attention. She was already riding away like she knew where they were going. Leo grabbed Cassie around the waist and boosted her onto the horse. Seconds later, he jumped astride in front of her. As they rode away from the cabin, Cassie snugged her arms around his waist. "Jen, do you know where you're going?" Leo called. "You said we were going north, so I'm riding north," Jennifer replied. Cassie laughed despite herself. Jennifer always thought she knew where she was going, even when she didn't. They rode to a remote valley a few miles away from the cabin. As Leo pulled his horse to a stop, he said, "The natural shape of the valley will mute the echo of the guns." "Great," Cassie replied. "I'm ready to learn how not to shoot my friend in the foot." Leo didn't laugh at her, but he looked like he wanted to. Well, that was okay. "Our father taught us to shoot when we were kids," Leo said. "When it comes to guns, the first rule is always assume a gun is loaded." Anton flashed a grin at Leo. Cassie could tell They were sharing a happy memory of time spent with their father. "The second rule is never, ever put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire," Anton said. "The third rule," Leo said, "is never forget rule number 1 and rule number 2. That will keep everyone safe. Now, you guys ready to learn how to shoot?" Cassie spent the next several hours sweating her brains out under the sun while Leo and Anton attempted to teach the three of them how to handle firearms. Anton had spray-painted a target on a big tree. They practiced with rifles, Soviet machine guns, and a .22 caliber. Of the three of them, Jennifer picked it up the fastest. Cassie and Amanda threw themselves into the training with determination. "You always make everything look easy," Cassie complained. "It doesn't matter what it is." This was why Jennifer had always been their mother's favorite. She was perfect in everything, from cheerleading to gymnastics to her looks. Cassie had tried to catch up with perfect grades, but what was a 4.3 GPA when your big sister could do flips like a Shanghai acrobat and snag the hottest guy at school? "It's not that I make things look easy," Jennifer replied. "It's that I decide going into things that I'm going to kick ass at them. It's all about confidence, Cass." "That's your secret?" Amanda asked. "Yep." Jennifer illustrated this point by firing the rifle 5 times in a row. Every bullet hit the target tree. When she finished, she lowered her gun and gave Cassie a gentle smile. "Try it," she said. "You can do it." Cassie decided to take a page out of Jennifer's book. By the time the day ended, her hands and forearms shook with fatigue. But she couldn't stop a pleased smile from splitting her face. She had hit the target no less than 7 times in a row. "Nice work," Leo grinned at her. Cassie tried to pretend the look didn't melt her from the inside out. Honestly, it was amazing she could even concentrate with him constantly touching her and adjusting her stance. "Do you think the rest of Stevenson's toes are safe?" she asked. Leo burst out laughing. "I hope so." "I knew you could do it." Jennifer slung an arm around Cassie. "Good job, sis. The Soviets don't stand a chance." As they rode back to the cabin, Leo said, "Still up for a chess lesson tonight?" In an attempt to cover up how much she looked forward to it, she said, "Sure thing, Jockface." "You don't stand a chance against my sister." Jennifer rode up beside them. "Have fun getting trounced, Leo." For some reason, Jennifer winked at him. Her expression was smug. Leo ignored her. It occurred to Cassie they might not be talking about chess, but she couldn't be certain. Maybe it was an inside joke between them. "After dinner?" Leo asked after Jennifer had ridden away. "You said you wanted to play outside under the stars, didn't you?" "I said I didn't want to play under the stars because I might get eaten by a bear, or a mountain lion, or whatever else lives outside. But I guess I know how to shoot now. Can I keep a gun on the table while we play?" Leo's shoulders shook with laughter. "So long as you don't use it for a chess piece, that won't be a problem." Chapter 16. Gordon Gambit. They spent the next 2 days making bombs under Nona's supervision, gathering supplies from the Gonzalez farm, and target practice. Cassie never dreamed she'd feel comfortable walking around with a rifle over one shoulder, but after long hours of practice with Leo and Anton, she now took one with her any time she left the cabin. She might not be an expert marksman, but she knew she could defend herself and not shoot the toes off of her friends. She and Leo played chess each night. He couldn't beat her, of course, but he was starting to play with real strategy and tactics. Cassie spent her days anticipating the evenings with Leo on the cabin porch. Her crush on him was escalating to ridiculous heights, though she did her best to tamp it down. It would help if he wasn't so damn nice. The only thing keeping her from making a complete idiot of herself was Jennifer. Though she and Leo argued like siblings and didn't appear to be reigniting their relationship, Cassie didn't think she'd appreciate her little sister flirting with her ex-boyfriend. The afternoon of the third day, she, Jennifer, and Amanda had their hour of target practice. After that, Cassie got to work inventorying all the supplies Jim and Bruce had scavenged from the Gonzalez house. She was counting bags of black beans when she heard the shout. "They're back!" Anton's voice echoed through the clearing outside the cabin. Cassie hurried outside. Everyone else piled out onto the porch as Lena, Dal, Jim, and Tate rode up the hill on their bikes. The group had already gone once to the Craigs' house to spy on the Russians. Lena had learned of a roundup of residents in western Rossi, but it had taken place the day before. Everyone had been frustrated they hadn't learned of the attack before it happened. Today was different. Cassie knew it was soon as Lena and the others arrived back home. Every last one of them pedaled with urgency. "What is it?" Leo demanded. "There's another attack planned for tomorrow." Lena dropped her bike to the ground, breathless from the long ride up Pole Mountain. "Where?" Anton said. "When?" "Everyone, inside," Nona barked. Once they were gathered inside the cabin, Lena related everything she had learned. The Soviets were planning yet another roundup. Their target was a tiny town north of Bastopol called Hillsburg. "We have to get the word out," Dal said. "We can save people." "Not if we tip our hand too early," Leo said. "Lena, what time is the attack on Hillsburg?" "Tomorrow morning," Lena said. "Then we make sure we are in position by dawn," Leo said. "We'll ambush the Soviets. Dal, you and Lena can warn the people at dawn." "We can't wait that long," Dal argued. "That won't give people enough time to get away." "If we broadcast too soon," Leo said, "the Soviets could change their plans and attack someplace else. It has to be this way if we're going to ambush them." He grabbed a stack of auto maps off a bookshelf and rifled through them. He found one for Hillsburg and spread it out on the kitchen table. "We need to figure out where they're going to take the people to be infected," Leo said. "They'll likely pick a central location for the soldiers to bring the people to. At the Westville Roundup, they picked a main highway crossroad. We'll just have to figure out where that central location will be in Hillsburg." "Downtown Square," Anton said. "Or the high school football field. Those are the best places for a large crowd." "I say we start with the high school," Bruce said. "At least there are vineyards that grow close to it. That will give us a place to hide for a stakeout. There's no place to hide downtown." "But what if they never show up at the high school?" Tate asked. "Then we'll have wasted all that time setting up an ambush for nothing." Cassie considered this argument. Leo and the others had gotten lucky when they stumbled onto the roundup in Westville. There was no guarantee they'd get lucky a second time. "The Gordon Gambit," Cassie said. Nearby, Stevenson groaned. "Enough with the chess moves, Cass. That way of thinking almost got us killed at Amanda's house." "That's not true," Amanda said. "Cassie got us out of the house. It's not her fault those zombies broke through the window." "What's the Gordon Gambit?" Leo asked. Cassie made an effort not to get technical. She turned the strategy over in her mind, boiling it down to its base form. In chess, you trick your opponent into taking a poisoned pawn. They think it's a decent move, but you're really setting up a double check that turns out to be checkmate. A poisoned pawn? Bruce asked. A pawn that looks innocuous, but capturing it sets up the opponent to get creamed in the worst way, Amanda explained. Basically, we trick the Russians into taking us prisoner, Cassie said. We sneak into a house and get ourselves caught. We're the poisoned pawns. It doesn't matter that we don't know where the roundup will be. We'll let the Soviets take us right to where we need to be. That's a terrible idea, Anton said. We can't take any weapons with us if we do that. Sure we can, Cassie countered. We'll look like stupid kids to the Russians. We can all shove a few bombs down our pants and hide handguns in our socks and waistbands. It's a good idea, Leo said. What are you talking about? Anton frowned at his brother. It's the dumbest idea ever. Leo opened his mouth to say something, but Cassie cut him off. She'd run all the scenarios in her head in the last 30 seconds. She might be mediocre with a gun, but she excelled at looking 3 to 5 moves ahead. We're at a disadvantage, she said. We don't know where they're gathering. There's no way to move in ahead of time and set up an ambush. We could go to the high school like Bruce suggested, but if no one is there? Diverting to downtown will take too long, especially with patrols everywhere. We could have the reverse problem if we choose to stake out downtown. The only way to guarantee we are in the right place at the right time is to get ourselves captured. Then we set off some bombs to cause a distraction, steal guns from the Russians, and attack from the inside. Everyone stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. Except for Leo. His eyes gleamed with pride when he looked at her. Leo turned to his younger brother. Do you have a better plan? Do any of you have a better plan? No one responded. The look Anton gave Cassie was one of consideration. It was a bit unnerving. Despite being in the same grade as him, she was pretty sure he hadn't even known who she was until she arrived at the cabin a few days ago. We go with the Gordon Gambit, Leo said. That's our play. Lena and Dal, you'll make the broadcast at dawn. Stevenson and I will help with the broadcast. Amanda raised her hand like she was still in school. I'll help Lena keep watch around the truck. Stevenson can help with the transmitter and antenna. Stevenson opened his mouth to protest, but Amanda stepped on his good foot. We all have to do our part, she said pointedly. Anton, Bruce, Jim, and Tate, Leo said. You're with me. We're riding out to Hillsburg before dawn. Don't forget about us. Jennifer grabbed Cassie's hand and dragged her forward. We're going. Cassie was torn between wanting to help and wanting to crawl under the table. Since Jennifer had her hand in an iron grip, she remained where she was. Leo frowned at Jennifer. He opened his mouth, argument clear on his face. Leo, we're going, Jennifer said. You need every hand on deck for this. Leo pursed his lips. Fine. You guys can come. Just promise me you'll be careful. His eyes met Cassie's for a brief moment. It's going to be dangerous out there. All the more reason for you guys to have all the help you can get, Jennifer replied sweetly. And that was how Cassie found herself rousted from bed at 4 a.m. With a Russian machine gun slung over one shoulder, she exited the cabin with the group, bound for Hillsburg.